everybody. We're breaking in here for a special interview. I'm sitting here with Sarah Duke, our vice president. How's it going, Sarah?
Hi, good. Thank you. It's a lovely Wednesday.
It is.
I'm enjoying the weather today.
And next week is going to be even better because it's being in the 60s. I know you love the hotter weather, but not me.
It's all good. I'm just ready for Halloween. And then
Fair
the holidays
enough.
to be over.
Yeah. A lot of candy, and then, of course, Christmas. Yeah, exactly. All that fun stuff.
Very true.
All the party holidays.
Yeah, I know it. Ready or not, here we come.
Exactly.
And we have to be safe. So we have the appropriate people in for an interview to keep your holidays safe, people.
That's right.
And ready to
Sarah,
get
who do
your
we have in
minds
our
blown.
studio today?
Well, first, I want to thank everyone for listening in. If you are driving, please be respectful out on the roads. We're going to get into a lot of that, what happens if you aren't respectful on the roads. For those of you that are viewing, you can go on all of our different streaming platforms, K4CO Radio on our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube and LinkedIn as well. I definitely encourage, we are going to unpack a lot of laws today and what you can and can't do, people. For those, my mind was absolutely blown. So definitely pay attention, be interactive. Let us know what questions you have or any comments. So we have Brad and Matt with us, who are the founding partners and personal injury attorneys at Smith and Weidinger. How are you guys?
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Good.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Good to have you guys. I mean, I love the first time I met you, Matt, is we unpacked a whole bunch of myths. So I definitely want to get into that. I'm sure you guys get asked those questions all the time. And I love the educational piece, because what you think sometimes is a lawful act really is not a lawful act. And on the flip side, too, I think to know the law when you actually can reach out to a lawyer, because sometimes I think people just have a quick conversation and then it goes away, and really you should have consulted a lawyer. So I'd love to get into the background, wherever you guys wanted to start, how you got into law and how you guys became partners.
Sure. So I became interested in law a long time ago. Grew up watching, JAG and Boston Legal and things like that. And although the practice of law, the everyday law practice, is a lot less glamorous than those shows, it can certainly be incredibly fulfilling. I grew up in Colorado and started out my law school career here. And actually, I started out west in Mesa County, Colorado, where I met Brad. We were deputy district attorneys together. So we got a lot of trial exposure in those roles, and handled a lot of cases and saw some things. But we, went our separate ways legally for a little bit, and Brad continued in the criminal law space, and I explored personal injury. And then we circled back together during the pandemic, and I think, like a lot of people, reevaluating our life paths and where we wanted to go. And we started talking about what we could do differently, better, and formed the practice almost 5 years ago.
Awesome.
What made you decide personal injury? What kind of gravitated you there to that?
So the opportunity to help people, to come into their lives, and I think that's a common thread for both of our practice areas, is we come into someone's life, whether they're injured in a car accident or whether they've been spontaneously arrested after they're accused of a crime. There's just a sudden surge of stress, anxiety, and these long-term life consequences that they are facing. And there are a lot of different laws that come into play. And there's also some non-legal components. And there's a lot of emotional burden on people that we try to help them carry. And I think that's one of the most fulfilling things.
Yes.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, it's definitely to help people. And high stress is right. I mean, usually that first phone call is probably not the most comfortable conversation ever. Well, Brad, how about you? What got you into, you're more on the criminal defense side.
That's correct.
I like it. You're a guy who I probably don't want to talk to, but if I'm on, it depends on which side. Depends on which side I'm on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very true. It's a very true statement. And fortunately, many of the people that call us, they don't end up needing us, but it's good to be able to answer those questions in a consult. For my part, I'm a rare native of Denver.
Nice.
I came up a proud graduate of the then Denver South Rebels, who have now the Denver South Ravens. They're in the Denver Public Schools. Followed that 4 years at CU Boulder, back during the last iteration of when the football program was decent under Gary Barnett, which we like to cheer on. And then I kind of went a separate path. I was a Navy officer and did deployments to the Far East, to the Middle East, and Africa. And after that time period, I had enough of the seas. I went to law school with the Kansas Jayhawks, and then joined Matt over at the Mesa County District Attorney's Office. Followed that by prosecuting here in Denver, and then switched sides, as they say, and came over to criminal defense.
Okay, I have to know why you switched. What goes on? Because I've known some lawyers who have done that, and I want the truth, because you're under oath here as a lawyer.
Well, and I think almost any solid criminal defense attorney in our field has either worked as a public defender or as a prosecutor. And when you come up working for the government, you do a huge volume of cases, and you're able to see innumerable trials, participate in them, be able to do things in your younger days in the profession that give you the grounding to be able to effectively advocate when you're out there as a private attorney. Mm-hmm. And similar to how we talk about the Broncos on Sunday, if you're devising a good defense, it's helpful to know how the offense thinks and what they're planning. And so I enjoyed being on that side. I enjoy being on this side a little bit more. I enjoy helping everyday people. And despite what sometimes stereotypes are put out there, there's a lot of people who run into the trouble with the law who are at heart very good people, and we help them through some of the worst times in their lives.
That's true. I bet you guys, I mean, that is probably true, that most people are your everyday and things just happen, right? Unless you're, from what I've experienced, it's an accident, right? Unless you're really going after someone, then it's a whole nother thing. But I think most people have good intent. What do you guys think? You get to see.
I would, even in my field, I think the truly malevolent person is definitely the exception. There's far more incidents, and you'll hear people talk about just how many possible felonies there are out there, things that you would never think that could be criminal conduct that you might find yourself enmeshed in or getting questioned about by a member of law enforcement or somebody in political authority. And it's good to have a resource. You can say, hey, what are my rights here? What does the law actually say? What is my exposure? And, we hope that we can provide answers to those questions for folks who never would imagine they become entangled. But hopefully we can answer those questions and find a route to settling those concerns.
What are some of those felonies that, just out of there where people would not even think this is a felony?
Like eating
right
spaghetti incorrectly or something.
Okay, maybe not that far.
You never know.
Right. That's a great question. There are some very silly laws, but, some things that people fail to realize is that, especially here in Colorado, with how much we enjoy our great outdoors, there are some felonies in the area of fish and wildlife that if you ever go set foot out in our state forests or state parks, you ever decide to hunt, you better pay attention during your hunting training class. You better pay attention to the regulations. You better do everything in season, where you're supposed to, how you're supposed to, and follow through on that, because people can't even imagine the amount of effort that our fish and wildlife officers will go through if you decide to commit any sort of what you might think is a minor infraction could very well turn out to be a federal or state felony.
Right.
Wow. That's a good point. I know a lot of people are tuning in on social media, but just in case you are listening and don't have their phone number in front of you, if you're in need of a lawyer, personal injury, or a criminal defense, 720-505-5621. You can call Smith and Weidinger, and they have 3 different locations, actually, Denver, Colorado Springs, and Arvada. So no matter where you are, they can help you. And I know people have questions all the time about what is legal and what's not. I'm curious because it's not just the 2 of you all. You have a bigger staff that helps you, correct? How many people are helping you?
So we actually just hired, including the 2 of us, our 8th team member.
Eight?
So
Okay.
we like to think we have a robust staff. We've been growing steadily. Call it sustainable growth. We like to be thoughtful, but also proactive and anticipate what our clients might need and how we can help them a little better, a little faster, and also reach out and expand our geographic reach and help as many people as possible. We try to be very tech forward and mobile so that we can go to people and meet them where they're at.
Nice. And that leads to my next question. What sets you all to make you a little bit more unique than other law firms that are out there?
You want to start?
Well, I think, one of the things we pride ourselves on is the personal attention. Of that staff, the lawyers, you're always going to be able to talk directly to a lawyer. Our lawyers do the consults. Every single client of ours has the lawyer's direct line. We're not going to just, one of the most common complaints we get to people who call us after another experience is, hey, I always was stuck with the middleman. I never got to talk to my actual attorney. Mm-hmm. And we pride ourselves on being available to personally answer those questions.
No, that's great. I can imagine so, especially I've gone through that in my own world and they just disappear. So I love the personal touch. And
to build on that, I would say that we really appreciate the opportunity to educate people and kind of roadmap what representation would look like for them and how the process goes. Because the fear of the unknown is huge, whether you're accused of a crime or you're seriously injured in an accident and the insurance adjusters are calling, you don't know what to say, whether you should even talk to them. Mm-hmm. So being able to kind of explain the process and next steps, right. I think really helps relieve a lot of those stressors or at least reduce them. Mm-hmm. And we really appreciate the opportunity to do that and then navigate them through that and keep them updated along the way. Because that's another common complaint that we hear if somebody comes to us after having representation is, I don't know where my case is at. I don't know what they're doing or why they're doing it or what's going to happen, how long my case is going to take. So we try to be very proactive and, like I said, visualizing that for them, illustrating it for them, and then following through and keeping them current. And I think Brad and I like to be very approachable and accessible, and we want clients to feel like they can reach out and there's not like a barrier, like you have to go through the support staff before you can get to us type of thing. Like, we don't think that's how the practice of law should work, or not in these practice areas, certainly.
No, right. It's great. To build that relationship.
And I think education is absolutely huge, especially today when there's all these tiny little things when it comes to insurance, when it comes to coverage, when it comes to, I heard if you're in an accident, they always say, pull your vehicles to the side, let traffic through. But then I've heard you shouldn't have done that. Or there's all these little things where it's just like, I wish I would have known after the fact. And you hear things over and over and over again. So you do a lot of automobile personal injury. Go through a couple of things that are just kind of common. Should you move your cars to the side of the road? Should you just ask for a lawyer right away and not answer any questions? What are some common things that everybody should know?
The biggest thing that I think everybody should know to do is call 911 after the collision, which sounds super obvious, but if you're busy and you're on the way to work, or you got to get somewhere to pick up your kid and you're thinking, I don't have time for this, I'll just do an insurance exchange, right. Or I'll get the person's phone number and let them leave the scene, and they said they'll text me a picture as soon as they get home or something,
or I even got a picture of their insurance card. Okay,
right, or you got a picture of the insurance card and then come to find out later, you get home, you try to call their insurance company, the policy was canceled, right. Or something like that. So calling 911 does a couple of different things, because first of all, it's not always clear when when your adrenaline surges and you're in shock, whether or not you are injured, have injuries. The person in another vehicle could be injured and you don't know. So creating the possibility of getting medical help is very important. And safety should be first and foremost. And the 911 operator can help you triage the situation and decide what level of help to send, usually ambulance and or fire, and then ask to have a police respond to the scene. During accident alert in a snowstorm, they won't always be able to get to you. Mm-hmm. But whenever possible, from our standpoint, it's good to have the police respond if you were not at fault and you were hit by somebody.
Or at least there's a record of you calling it.
And that's what it is. It's creating that objective, factual record of what happened.
Right.
Because you could go online and file a report later, but that's really just your own statement in writing. It's not an objective third party, a law enforcement officer in a position of authority who responds and creates a formal report. So, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things that really should happen after a car accident is you just get a police officer out there, even if they say, they'll usually ask you too and give you that empowerment. So you can always say, yes, I'd really appreciate if you could send an officer out. And they say, well, it could be 30 minutes. I'd like an officer sent out. And there's, I think a criminal defense reason to have an officer come out too is if it's a disputed liability type of situation, you don't want to be accidentally hit with a leaving the scene of an accident accusation.
Ooh. See, that's stuff I don't think about. Okay. Brad, you're very quiet over there.
No. I mean, nobody who calls in and just, I mean, people, it might sound obvious, but all 911 calls, all dispatch calls are recorded.
Right.
And so if you made that call, there's going to be conclusive proof, and you're going to have that fresh recollection that somebody said within minutes of it happening, hey, I was on X street.
Right.
Person came from this direction, hit me. And, there's nothing better than fresh evidence. Relaying memories a day or two later is just not the same.
True. Even if it's really, truly a very minor fender bender. If you're going 3 miles an hour and you bump in and you both pull over, still call 911, no matter how quote-unquote minor you think it is. Yes? Okay.
Yes, just so that there's that record.
Okay, that's
right
interesting. Okay.
I mean, if you hit your own garage in the driveway, you can deal with that yourself. But if you make contact with any other vehicle, it's a good practice to follow.
Okay, that's good. And I truly have hurt my own garage. So
Oh yeah,
just throwing that out
can
there.
certainly happen to any of us.
Yeah, me too. When I was 14, I drove the car through the garage door. Garage door was on top of it. It was wonderful. Paid for that till I was 18.
Never live it down. I know it.
And everybody here, I mean, you're a native. Everybody here loves the changes and loves the traffic on I-25. When it comes to in an accident, move your cars all the way to the side. Is that an okay thing to do? Or is that up to 911 when you call them? If you're instructed by 911 to move your cars, then you're instructed.
I think that's the more responsible thing to do is allow the 911 operator to triage the situation. Because sometimes you might be in shock and think, oh yeah, I can just move my car, but you may not be thinking clearly. You may be really badly hurt. The vehicle may not be safe to move. The operator can help you triage that situation.
Gotcha. Perfect.
I love it.
And traffic obviously is a pain point for everyone, but the far more important thing there is obviously the safety of the people that have been in the accident.
I would think that you guys are so busy. Like, truly. I-25 to me is so crazy. I even said it yesterday, and it seems progressively worse. People are driving faster, they're more distracted, and angry. Like, it's a whole nother level of just being on it and honking, and I'm like, what? Really? I get that you want to get home and have dinner, but is it really worth going through all of this? So, I mean, I'm glad that you guys are probably busy, and it does come down to safety.
There's accidents
right?
every single day, and it's just, it's nuts. I mean, especially since 2012, right? No. But I do want to actually bring this up because, Colorado had a huge influx of people because 2012 is when marijuana became legalized here. Mm-hmm. And so I bet also between both of you guys, I mean, you have the personal injury type stuff, but then you also have criminal liability on that because of the substances. So what are some of the differences that you can point out? Because DUIs have been around forever.
Absolutely.
Not many people know about when it comes to marijuana here in Colorado. What are some of the big differences there?
And absolutely, and it's always been since DUI's been a law in Colorado. It's not just drinking; it involves any pharmaceutical, any narcotic. Marijuana is obviously the one we see more than any other. The key difference is in alcohol. It's been very well studied, and the federal government, many of you who are a little bit older would remember we had a .1 standard, which was the nationwide standard, and everybody followed that. And then about 15, 20 years ago, there was a shift over to a .08 standard.
.08, yep.
And you can ask most, normal adults out on the street, they'll say, oh yes, .08 is the legal limit. With marijuana, it's very different. Because of complexities with marijuana still being illegal, according to the federal government, they haven't had the ability to study it as well, because you, as a university or a medical organization, would be using something that's illegal, and then following up with studies. So there is no per se legal limit to say you have this much marijuana in your system, ergo you are automatically guilty of DUI.
Right.
And in fact, if you do end up taking a blood test, you'll receive three different numbers as to how much THC is in your system. And it's far beyond me. It takes a medical person to describe in excruciating detail why each of them are different. But what they're looking for is the active THC, because somebody can smoke marijuana every day and every week, and unlike alcohol, it shows up in your system. And you'll always shown in a blood test for many weeks, even months afterwards, that you've consumed marijuana. Unlike alcohol, where even on the biggest bender, 2 to 3 days later, you're going to not be able to tell that.
Right.
So what they're looking for is something called Delta 9, and it spikes really high immediately once you've consumed it, and then drops rapidly. But it really depends on, are you smoking marijuana? Are you using edibles? Different things. And we'll often see people who might be visiting Colorado or experimenting will pick up a DUI in Vail or Breckenridge because edibles just are something that they tried. They feel okay for a little bit, and then it hits them when they're driving poorly. Conversely, we'll see people who are steady marijuana users, and they'll get pulled over, and the officer will say, I smell marijuana, have them do roadsides. And you'll actually see juries having a very difficult time trying to determine whether that person was intoxicated or not, versus in the cases where we have an alcohol reading where, because it's been so drummed into the community, if you're above .08, it's very difficult for a jury to say, we're going to find that guy not guilty. Now, there's always niches and things to work around, but marijuana DUIs are always more complicated.
Right.
Boy, I have a lot of questions.
Sure.
I don't partake in that, not because of any reason, but it's with any of it. I had my fun in my 20s, so I will out myself in that. So how do people know then? How can you judge, hey, I can go have an edible and still get in the car, or I can go smoke a joint and still drive? If there's so much gray area, how do you advise clients? How does anyone really advise people?
So the best advice, and Colorado has some of the strictest driving under the influence rules of anywhere in the country.
Really?
So you have driving under the influence, and then you have a law in Colorado called driving while ability impaired.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what the law for driving while ability impaired is that if you are impaired to the slightest extent in your ability to drive, you can be convicted. So anybody who has a basic middle school education would know that if you have one beer, you have to be impaired to the slightest extent.
Right.
Now, does that mean you have to be paranoid if you have your one Bud Light and then you drive an hour later? I mean, don't live paranoid. But the only way to absolutely have no concern about driving under the influence is to not mix anything to do with marijuana or alcohol to do with driving. And that, at the end of the day, that's going to be the only legally correct way of saying how you should handle it. And you can actually see people, whether it's the .08 DUI or even a .06 DWAI, you can argue whether subjectively that's reasonable under the laws, but our legislatures make the laws, and they say if you're impaired to the slightest extent, a jury can find you guilty. So exercising caution is always the best prescription when you're thinking about whether to drive or not. And if you're asking yourself that question, should I be driving or not?
You probably
You might have
should.
already know
Shouldn't.
the answer.
Well, it is,
Exactly.
well, even the slightest ability, like if I wake up and I'm really tired, my
Sure.
ability is probably impaired.
Oh, of course.
If I am sick and I took a slug of Dayquil, my ability is probably impaired. So I think there's so much gray area when it comes to that.
If you drink too much coffee, I'm sure there's
exactly. You
impairments
can
there.
be,
So,
exactly.
And nobody would ever accuse our laws of being fair because the penalties for having a DUI where you're barely over the limit are typically harsher than if you're sitting there on your cell phone and you roll out into traffic through a red light because you're not paying attention and you T-bone somebody.
Right.
The person who gets the low-end DUI where they might have a cracked windshield and get pulled over and the officer smells alcohol, they'll end up with a harsher form of probation. And in some ways, there's a positive because our community is more sensitive to the dangers of DUI, but other forms of driving that we see every day with our personal injury clients are more tolerated in a way that we see just horrible collisions caused by inattentiveness, and they often get off with a slap on the wrist compared to somebody who might have alcohol or marijuana involved.
That drives me so crazy when I see people truly doing their makeup and sending faxes and texting, and it just, I see it every single day.
well, and I'm glad you brought it up with the cell phones because we have that new cell phone law
Right.
where you can get a ticket for having your cell phone in your hand, which honestly, me personally, yes, everybody, I am so for. I am so for. I mean, I see people on their phones driving all the time, and it just
My son said it yesterday. It's like I go on field trips and I see people doing it all the time on I-25. It was like,
yeah, and that causes accidents.
Of course.
I mean, all the time as well. And so DUI is basically 0.08 plus, and then you can really get a DWAI any time below 0.08. I mean,
Right. If a jury were to look at it objectively and look at the evidence, and that's where when you're under .08, it really matters. Did you do field sobriety tests? Were you driving poorly? But we all know that friend of ours, everybody has one that has one drink,
Yep.
and they're woozy, and we know that friend who has 10 drinks,
And they're
and
fine.
walking
They're
around
like,
fine.
yeah.
And the law says you can be driving, and you'll even see it. That guy who drinks 10 beers every day, he might think he drives perfectly. But if he gets rear-ended, he might not be even at fault in the accident.
Right.
And the officer comes up and says, well, we're sorry you got hit, sir, but I'm smelling alcohol in your breath. He can end up with a DUI, and if his blood or breath test comes back over .08, a jury's told that if they believe that that was a professionally conducted test, that's a permissible inference that the person has committed a DUI.
And that's where that's where the personal injury side of it probably, I would think an injury side of it when it comes to a DUI, DWAI is far worse than somebody who just, oops, I hit somebody. Is that correct statement?
Yeah, so the inattentiveness that goes along with driving substantially impaired obviously has a greater danger to life and limb, and that aggravates the situation beyond the injury to the person, but also the legal consequences. So there are certain types of conduct that go beyond the pale of mere accident or carelessness. Can subject you to punitive damages. In certain scenarios, punitive damages are not even covered by insurance. So if you cause an accident and you do something like that, like your DUI being DUI can be the basis for punitive damages. So that the person you hit and injure can go after you for that. Which means punitive damages are punishment damages. So it's above and beyond your medical bills or your lost wages, pain and suffering and things like that. Punitive damages exist to punish conduct and try to deter it.
Right.
So those are civil recoverable damages that way. But we also see, sad to say, because of what we were talking about, phone usage and texting and driving, a lot of situations where people are kind of relying on the driver-assisted technologies, just kind of cruising along, not paying attention maybe, looking around and hoping that they'll get that like beep or the chirp noise from the car alerting you that you're coming up too close on somebody, or maybe you have a vehicle that will activate the brakes for you. But if you're going down I-25, you're cruising along at 55, 65, and traffic has come to a complete stop ahead of you, and you're not paying attention, your driver-assisted technology is not going to stop in time. It's not going to stop fast enough for you. It's meant to mitigate minor situations and stop and go traffic, but it's not going to prevent a crash there. So we see a lot of those situations, and the biggest thing, we talked earlier about things people should know after an accident. Follow up and get medical treatment. And that, I'm not a doctor, But I'm just telling you, as somebody who sees a lot of these injury claims, if you have anything you notice that is new or worsened, go get checked out. Go get checked out by a professional.
Right.
Depending on how worried you are about it, that might mean the ER, the urgent care, or your primary care doctor, or a specialist relevant to the type of complaint that you have. If your knee, if you hit your knee on the center console in the crash and it hasn't stopped bothering you, then go online and find a knee specialist. And it's so important for your own health and well-being, and getting back to what you were doing before the crash happened, but also for your legal recovery as well. That documentation that you showed up, and there's a medical record that's generated, says he showed up with knee pain after a crash, described the type of crash, and based on that crash, in my examination, he needs XYZ treatment, physical therapy, and follows the steps. And so then you're on the right path. You've gotten the medical information you deserve to have after a no-fault crash, and you have a treatment plan in place, and there's documentation of it.
Right. As long the documentation is probably just key in everything. I would say.
It is, and I always tell people it's not just for the case; it's really for your own health too. Because more and more there's electronic health records, and hospital care systems can import some of your records, and you can share and export them with different practices when you change practices or move. So the documentation helps you chronologically, because God forbid you had a knee injury 5 years later, they could compare an MRI from now to the one 5 years in the future and look back and understand what has changed anatomically. So it's just good information for you to have.
Completely. I know a couple of people just joined in, so I want to make sure that people can follow along. So we have Brad and Matt. They are attorneys and lawyers over at Smith and Weidinger. And I want to give you the website too. It's caraccidentlawyerindenver.com. They have 3 different locations, and you can call them at 720-505-5621. You brought up, so I want to unpack kind of more personal injury too, because again, there's so much gray area. So like slips and falls, we're coming up into our winter season. So where does insurance, where does the personal stuff come in, especially homeowners insurance? You're walking along the sidewalk. Are you on a person's driveway? Are you walking up to King Soopers in their parking lot? Like there's so much gray area where who is at fault. And should we always default and say, I need legal expert advice?
Well, and you said sidewalks too. Now in Denver,
right, who owns what?
residents have to pay for sidewalk repairs, not the city. That's a new thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the duty changes legally with the type of visitor on the property and why they're there. So the reason for them being on the property actually changes the duty that the landowner, the person in control of the land, has. So if you are going shopping for groceries, and you're walking in there during a snowstorm, the grocery store is still wants you to still spend money. If they're still open, they want you to spend money. They're inviting you in.
Right.
You are there, for your own benefit to get groceries, but the business would go under if nobody bought groceries. So for the benefit of the business. So there is a legal duty that the business has to make sure that there are no dangerous conditions on the property. So that means snow and ice removal. That means cleaning up spills in the aisle and keeping a lookout for those things to a reasonable degree. If you are visiting someone's house for a party, the duty on the landowner is not quite as high because you're there essentially for your own benefit. You're a social guest. There's not a monetary transaction going on, probably. But assuming it's just assuming you're just a social guest, the duty that the person has is lower. But that's not to say that should make somebody hosting a party incredibly sloppy with how they prepare.
So if I'm visiting a friend and I'm bringing them a gift and I slip and fall and break my hip, I can't sue my friend.
So there would be social complications to doing that regardless. And
That's okay.
But in that situation, it would really depend on what you slipped on. It does get hyper technical with snow and ice removal situations. So how long ago was the snow? Has it been continuous? Did the person do anything to mitigate the circumstances? Like, did they put salt down? Did they shovel? Maybe they shoveled, but it has been snowing for like 4 hours since then, and they didn't go back and hit it again or do anything else to it. So it can get very fact specific with the snow and ice, and it also comes into play as far as what footwear a person is using. So if you slip at your friend's house and you are wearing your beach sandals over during the snowstorm, your case maybe has a weak point there, something that the other side could use to undermine that. But if you're wearing appropriate footwear and the person has had opportunities and is aware of the conditions and didn't mitigate them, then your case generally is better, regardless of the type of visit so far. But
what else falls under the personal injury? We've covered kind of slips and falls and some car accidents, but there are other things that I think maybe people don't always think about.
So another big area of cases that we handle is going to be dog bites or dog attack situations. And a lot of times those involve the neighbors, and the situation is really sticky, and the people, it's almost never a situation where dog owner sics dog on helpless victim, right? It's a dog, it gets off the leash for one reason or another, attacks the person, bites the person, and depending on the number of bites or the positioning, that can cause really serious injury. So that situation can also be fact specific as to, was a dog on the leash or not, but in a dog off-leash situation, Colorado tends to be one of the states that imposes a strict liability on the owner of the dog for bites, injuries caused by the dog to others. And those cases are actually covered by insurance in large part. So in most of those scenarios, they're going to be covered by your homeowner's insurance, even if it happens away from the home, maybe at a park, not even close to your house, because homeowners' policies are general liability policies, not like an auto policy, which is a very specific type of coverage. It's one that everybody should have, is required to have by law, but a homeowner's policy is a general liability policy. It has personal liability protection for you for causing injury to others, or for your dog causing injuries to others. There are some exceptions. Some carriers write in exclusions. If your dog has had trouble in the past and has bitten a lot of people, carriers, underwriters try to say, we're not going to insure that dog. So there are some exclusions and limitations, but in large part, we've been able to help victims get recoveries through homeowners policies.
I take it in situations like when it comes to pets or anything, there's no crossover where even criminal liability can be.
Unfortunately, there is. You, in many cases, are responsible for your dog. Now, part of that is what you know about your dog's personality. If you know you have a vicious dog, and you don't keep him in your yard or keep him on a leash, and it gets out and attacks somebody, you may be violating ordinances, depending on the amount of damage the dog does. It can, in fact, be a very serious offense. And obviously, we here in Colorado are dog lovers, I think, in many ways. And, whatever criminal liability you face, the fact that the dog might be destroyed by the county is a really horrible situation for everybody involved. Right. So those are the type of cases, like many things, where there's just no winners. But it's important to get the right advice, whether you find yourself on the side of the person who's been bit, or a family member bit, or your dog is the one in the docket.
Is there ever a situation, and this might be a personal opinion, maybe not all on lawyer speak, if you are bit by a dog, is there ever a situation where you should not contact insurance or a lawyer?
Well, and it goes back to kind of what we talked about with, hitting your own garage. If you're messing around with your own dog and you get bit by your own dog, it probably makes sense for you to seek medical attention when you need it, but you can't generally sue yourself.
Okay.
So,
and to this day, you can't press charges against the dog.
You could, if somebody had a dangerous dog and it ended up biting themselves, it'd be a tricky situation.
Because in Boulder, you're a guardian. That's an interesting point. Have you ran into that situation before?
Well, Boulder has many, it's its own people's republic up there.
Yep.
You went to
I think-
CU, so
Right.
you can say that.
I mean, I think those are those fact-specific scenarios where if you're like, boy, I'm not sure exactly where this falls, that's where it's important to reach out to us or another competent lawyer to say, hey, this was a scenario where I was injured. And there are just those occasions, especially when it comes to your personal property, where you damage your own car, your dog bites you, you take the nail gun and you put a hole in your foot, where it's just a lesson learned more than it is a legal issue, and you move on with your life.
Right.
So every, whether it's, and there are cases where the dog can be completely innocent. If somebody breaks into your yard and your dog decides to maul them, I mean, your home is your castle. Somebody's a trespasser. Your dog's an extension of yourself, kind of when it comes to your ability to defend your property. So there'll be all kinds, and then you'll get those situations where, well, his hand was over the fence, or maybe it wasn't over the fence. Maybe the dog bit him here. And you'll get those questions where, again, if you're in that position of somebody getting hurt and you're fairly certain you're in the right, that's when you do want to report it so that you get that documentation, you get that support.
And Colorado has always been big on protecting your own property. Is that correct?
Yes. So you're kind of how, when it comes to issues of self-defense, which can apply anywhere in the state, it can apply just walking down the street, you have the inherent right to protect yourself. But there's something called castle doctrine, where you have a stronger ability to use deadly force against somebody who is, in your reasonable opinion, committing a crime. So, I mean, again, there's all sorts of subsets to the rule. So it's typically not somebody you invite over and just get an argument over Broncos versus Raiders. But if you wake up at 3 a.m. and somebody's coming through your window, you're not required to stand there and ask 10 questions before using force. It's what would an objectively reasonable person do in that situation? And you have a far greater leeway for using force, even deadly force in that situation, whereas on the street, the calculation is somewhat different, though you still have the inherent right of self-defense.
And we all know those Broncos Raiders debates can get heated.
I don't like the Chiefs, but we won't get into that.
Well, of course.
And that's similar to Make My Day. Is that correct? Is that
Right.
the right
So that
the
would,
law?
you also hear stand your ground and so forth. And self-defense is one of the most complicated parts of the law. And in a case where there is evidence that self-defense is used, you don't have to prove that you justifiably use self-defense. Instead, a prosecutor has to prove all the other things that would come with an assault, but he also has to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt that you did not use appropriate self-defense. So meaning you can't use self-defense if you start the fight. You can't use disproportionate self-defense. So if somebody slaps you, you can't whip out your concealed carry handgun and blast them.
Right.
It has to be timely. You can't, oh, my neighbor threw a snowball at me a week ago, and now I'm going to wait and lie and, pepper him with a paintball gun.
Self-defense is you punch me, I punch you.
Right. And if you hit him and he falls on the ground, you can't continue to punch him while he's laying there exposed. Once the danger is extinguished, you can't just say, I now have a green light. And you'll see these very tragic situations where people will see somebody breaking into their car and chase them, and they might take a shot at them, and you just can't rationally argue the guy was 40 yards away from me and running away, and I shot him, and it's self-defense because it just doesn't equal a objectively reasonable estimation of the situation.
Yeah. I think it's very hard, especially in the heat of the moment. I mean, if someone is breaking into your house at 2 a.m, I don't know, that would be, again, there's so much gray area.
Well, that's the one that's the least amount of gray area. If somebody's breaking into your home, you have
I have full right to do.
Right.
Okay.
Now you might want to pause if you have a college student who's been known to lose their keys, and they
Sure.
might want to, go in without waking mom or dad up. But by and large, if somebody is yelling at you, kicking down your door, that's where it would be incredibly difficult for the government to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that your self-defense wasn't justified.
Okay.
I'm very curious for kind of both of you. You guys have been doing this for a while. I'm curious if there's an example of something where even you guys were absolutely surprised and learned a great deal because of a certain case, where it turned out in something that you just did not think. You were shocked as to the outcome or as to the process.
So without getting into the specifics, a new thing in Colorado has been legalized sports gambling.
Yeah.
Really?
If you are a participant
I didn't know
in or referee or have anything to do with putting on games, you do not want to mix that with wagering on sporting events.
Right.
Because the penalties can be very harsh.
Man, I'm
Right.
glad
It's
that wasn't
fine with
around.
Kansas City, but in Colorado, we're
Yeah, what if I'm like betting but for him and I like $1 on a game?
Oh no, so the social betting.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
not
We just
rats.
don't want you if you're playing for the Buffaloes or playing for the Rams or a referee, at an NBA game.
Mm-hmm.
It can be
Gotcha.
the penalties can be extraordinary, and of course the
As it should.
Well, the government found a new form of revenue, and they really want to protect that. And if people think that games, there's any question, is this guy missing the shot because
Yeah.
he's just not shooting well tonight, or is he missing it because he's
Right.
got
It's
a over
Shaving
under
points.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you don't want to watch. We love our sports in America. We love our sports in Colorado. I don't know if we love our dogs or our sports more, but there's a huge imperative to keep those sports clean, and don't give a betting app to your 16-year-old. Don't, whatever the rules are. It's another agency, the Gaming Commission, similar to what I talked about the Wildlife Commission. It's not the stuff that you think about when you normally think of crime,
Right.
like theft or violence, but people can get themselves in a lot of trouble.
That's a good point. I mean, I think I've watched some boxing in the past that felt a tad rigged. We'll just leave it at that. Just felt like, I think he missed on purpose. Yeah, I love the eyebrow map. What about you? Is there a case that, not going into specifics, but that kind of shocked you?
Yeah, so interestingly, because we advertise as criminal defense and personal injury, we have had several scenarios where people thought that they were really calling for criminal defense. And these are usually in motor vehicle collision type situations. But upon further investigation, it turns out the other driver was more at fault. So they'd call because maybe they were ticketed for like a minor infraction, but turns out the other driver committed a much greater traffic violation and was the majority cause of the wreck. And that gives the caller the opportunity to present a personal injury claim, because personal injury claims are based on civil law, which is a preponderance of the evidence, which just means more likely than not. So if like 50.0001% to the other person's 49.999999%. Now your recovery can be reduced by your percentage at fault if you have any. Now, of course, if you are lawfully traveling through an intersection, you get hit by a red light runner, you're not speeding, they run a red light, you have 0% at fault. But if you pull out from an intersection in front of through traffic on a highway and you get struck, you are potentially failing to yield. But if the vehicle traveling crossways is speeding grossly in excess or is driving under the influence like we talked about, texting while driving, all kinds of permutations like that, and maybe had an opportunity to notice you pulling out and swerve or do something, hit the brakes, and they did none of those avoidance maneuvers, then it calls into question is who is more at fault. So actually, a lot of vehicles that have been... It varies by manufacturer, but I'd say most vehicles in the last 5 years have little black boxes in them, and you can, even in catastrophic collisions that are preserved and data can be downloaded from them. It's not a video reconstruction like a dash cam, but it'll have basic information you can use to reconstruct the crash. So like velocity information, how fast is the vehicle traveling, and kind of binary data like was the brake activated or not.
Right.
And that's very simple, but it could be super helpful because it stores like the last 5 seconds before an event, which is a crash typically, for our purposes. So if the other driver didn't brake in the last 5 seconds, was speeding, as recorded, there's no steering input, i.e. didn't try to turn, then you can infer, probably make a pretty good argument that that person was not paying attention at all and was looking down, texting and driving, maybe changing the radio, whatever, but wasn't paying attention to the road. So that can be really useful information, and we do have situations where, the caller will kind of assume that they might be at majority at fault, but it turns out they're minority at fault and they may have an injury claim against the other person.
Yeah, it was what you just described is almost exactly what happened to me several years ago. As I was pulling out and the guy was speeding in excess, actually went through his windshield, and he was at the majority of fault by like substantially, totaled my car. And I learned a lot through that, and thankfully we both walked away from it, it's not always the case, but it is super interesting to go through it. I was advised, what you're talking about, majority, minority, he was looking down at his phone, definitely speeding in excess, wasn't paying attention, etc. So I think it's good with the education part. I had more of a specific question in both of your cases. So if you are being represented, you're in the middle of the case, a lot of times the other person's lawyer will call you. What should the person do in that case, in that situation?
Well, in a criminal case, it's fairly clear cut. Once you're represented, other lawyers who are representing the other side should be going to your lawyer and having the conversation with them. And in a criminal case, typically the person, it's not, in Colorado when a crime occurs, it's not one person against another person, it's the people of the state of Colorado through the elected district attorneys and their deputy district attorneys who are prosecuting the case. But just like the police can't talk to you when you have a lawyer, the prosecutors shouldn't be reaching out to you, and you just would always refer them back to your own personal lawyer.
Okay.
So the most common reason why somebody calling us would still get a call from the other person's attorney is if we had one of those mixed liability scenarios where maybe they lawyered up thinking the other driver lawyered up because they think they're minority at fault and they should have a claim. They were the victim against our client, and we are investigating the situation from the other direction with the assumption that the other driver is at fault and our client's the victim. In a situation like that, attorneys have professional duties not to contact people they know are represented. So in a situation like that, the simple answer is all you have to do is say, I actually have an attorney, please contact them.
So in the situation I just told you about, I was represented, and the other lawyer actually called me several times. And I didn't know if that was something legal that lawyers could do, but every time I said, you need to contact my lawyer, I can't give you any information. So I didn't know if that carried on, because a lot of times I heard, they're after, is there emotional claims? Is there other things that we can go after? So it's good to know that, stop doing it, people.
Right, exactly.
Be good representations of lawyers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I just want to throw it out there. I have a feeling that cell phones are going to start getting a lot more, looked at when it comes to driving, both on personal injury and if somebody does get seriously injured, if not even somebody dies in a wreck, it could be criminally liable.
Absolutely.
When it comes to that. Do you guys see that happening as well, especially with this new law with the cell phones where it can't be in your hands?
So the government only has so much capacity. So in your average, mild car accident, or even your even a DUI involved wreck that isn't so bad, they can only expend so many resources. But if there's a fatality wreck or a serious wreck, they can, in addition to pulling the black box from the car, they can seize your cell phones. They can go back, read, and see if you were texting at that time, if you were on an app, if you were watching a video, if you have an entertainment system in your car, they can know if that was on. They can know if you texted your friends immediately after the wreck saying, "Boy, I screwed up," or "I had too much to drink."
Right.
I mean, there are ways that people can somewhat mitigate that, but anything you type into your phone or anything you look up, if the government really wants to find it, they can find out.
They can find it.
I have tried so many times screaming into my phone with Siri just really horrible things, and the government doesn't care about what I do. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Not yet.
I'm just saying, come find me. I'm so boring that they're like, really, just stop trying. Like, we have bigger fish to fry. But I've tried, and no one
Very
seems
fair.
to care. Yeah. I'm curious, for both of you all, how often are you able to settle out of court? Probably less on the criminal side, I would think, but...
Well, you typically, it's rare that a case is entirely settled out of court, but a plea agreement, which is where both sides don't get everything they want, but they're able to have a meeting of the minds, is essentially how 95 to 97% of all criminal
Oh, wow.
justice cases are resolved.
Wow.
The actual trial makes wonderful TV, wonderful for the movies, but that's a very small segment. You can just think on any given day how many people are arrested in Denver or Colorado Springs or Fort Collins, and if every one of those cases had a trial,
Right.
we would all be serving jury duty,
Yeah.
Yeah.
4 weeks out of the year. So for the most part, both sides look at the evidence. You get credit for if you lived a law-abiding life, and then both sides, aggressively, and we try to aggressively negotiate our plea agreements, but the majority of cases end up in some sort of plea.
Okay. So,
Yeah, so on the civil side, I'd like to share something that I think is a pretty common misconception that people have. When you slip and fall at your friend's house, and you ask your friend, "Hey, could I have your insurance information? I have a lot of medical bills. Your homeowner's policy might be able to help me out. It's more, I have a huge deductible. That's not suing your friend yet. That's just an insurance claim structurally. Similarly, if you're in a car accident, you call the other person's insurance and you say, "I need some help with my medical bills," or you get a lawyer to do that for you. And just because you get a lawyer to do that for you, it doesn't mean that it's a lawsuit or that you're suing anybody yet. It's just an insurance claim structurally. And there's a lot of data out there. I don't know the specific numbers, but I'm confident saying that over 90% of insurance claims get settled before they ever become lawsuits. Even that percentage, most of the lawsuits get settled before they get all the way to trial. So we notice, I'll talk to people who were in a crash like 6 or 7 months ago, or sometimes like a year ago, and they're just now reaching out because the insurance company has been lowballing them and frustrated them a lot. But they'll say, "Okay, I'm finally ready to sue." And they may not even need to. They may just need to make a strong claim, build the evidence, gather the documentation, and present it in the right way. And people a lot of times don't even bring claims or reach out to a lawyer because they think, "Oh, I don't want to, sue the person who hit me. Seems like it was an accident. They seem like a really nice person. I don't want to go after them." And this is maybe more of a personal opinion about insurance, but insurance exists to indemnify you. It exists to protect you financially. So you have auto insurance. I have auto insurance to protect me in the event that I were to cause a crash and injure somebody. That's what it's there for.
We're required to have
Yeah,
it,
we're required to have
Right.
auto insurance, and the limits are pretty low compared to the size of an average ER bill, but that's probably, we could have a separate expose on that. But yeah, insurance is there for a reason, and most cases can be settled while they're insurance claims. So a person should never refrain from exercising their rights or, stomach huge financial distress because they're worried about suing someone. Like, because we always have that conversation. If the insurance top offer is still not good enough, not fair, then we can convert the claim to a lawsuit. But there's a very clear distinction there.
oh, thank you for that. Yeah, we unpacked a lot. You guys are amazing. I could have you in here for hours. There's so much to uncover with our law. Anything else quick question before we signed off that you had I have too many burning desires. We don't have enough time.
No, I'm good. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to make sure to say while you're in here at K4CO?
We offer free consultations. So if you've been accused of a crime or something happened and you're not sure about your liability, you can call us and get a free consultation. If you've been injured and you're not sure if there's some element of negligence or that you have the ability to recover it from somewhere somehow, then yeah, we do free consultations on both sides of the practice. We're just happy to meet you where you're at.
There you go. And that's 720-505-5621. And you can look them up. Car accident lawyer in Denver.com, actually, the website as well. So thank you very much, guys, for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, we enjoyed it.
I know.
Thank you for having us.
You guys are amazing. Seriously, if you need a lawyer, please give them a call. And it's good just to educate yourself.
Right.
Like, we only unpacked a little bit. I have so many more questions, but I find it fascinating. If you don't know, give them a call.
Exactly. Just informational only. Thank you very much for listening. If you did catch kind of the end of the interview, do know that the entire interview will be on the K4CO radio social media platforms for at least a month. On YouTube, it should remain indefinitely, of course. So rewatch it. Definitely, if you have any questions or anything at all, reach out. 720-505-5621. Thanks for tuning in. Do you know every single day from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. we have one solid hour of only your Colorado musicians in our rotation. The rest of the time, it is a third of our rotation, which is great. And then, of course, tonight at 9 p.m., we have another episode of Kind of Vague Radio, another great show hosted by Andrew Tallon and Rob Dixon with only Colorado artists as well. So thank you very much for tuning in, and you guys have an amazing night. Thanks.